Keanu Reeves stood alone at the edge of a quiet street that morning, wearing his simple black jacket and faded jeans, blending in with the city's early rush. The air smelled of wet asphalt because it had rained all night. Puddles stretched across the cracked pavement like tiny mirrors, reflecting broken street lamps and passing headlights. No one would have guessed that the tall, soft-spoken man, patiently waiting for a cab, was the same actor whose face had inspired millions across the world. For him, this was just another ordinary day. He was on his way to visit an old friend. In the hospital, a friend who once saved his life in a motorcycle accident years ago. Keanu never forgot people who stood by him when he was nothing but a grieving young man, with nobody to call family. But that quiet moment did not last long. The street suddenly trembled as a shiny black SUV came racing down, its tires slicing through the largest puddle on the street. Keanu saw it coming, but had no time to move. Cold, muddy water splashed across his legs, chest, and even his face. It was like an icy slap that turned his plain clothes into a dripping mess. He stood there frozen, water trickling down his hair. The SUV skidded to a halt, not because the driver cared, but because the traffic light turned red. Inside the SUV sat a woman with sharp features and expensive sunglasses that did little to hide her irritation. Her name was Marissa, a wealthy socialite who believed the city belonged to her. She glanced at Keanu through her tinted window. Her lips curled into a mocking smirk as she saw him wiping mud from his face with the sleeve of his jacket. To her, he was just another nobody who didn't deserve to stand on her road. She pressed a button, rolling down her window just enough to let her voice drip with disdain. "Watch where you stand next time," Marissa hissed, tapping her fingers on her leather steering wheel. "Some of us have places to be." Keanu looked at her, his eyes calm but deep with a kindness that confused her. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult her. Instead, he spoke so softly she almost missed it. "I hope your day gets better," Keanu said. His voice held no anger, just an odd warmth that made her fingers pause. But the light turned green, and before she could say anything, Marissa slammed the gas pedal. The SUV roared forward, leaving Keanu standing alone in the middle of the street, drenched and shivering, but somehow still composed. Passersby whispered among themselves. A few recognized him but stayed silent, unsure whether to offer help. But Keanu did not care about the stares. He took out an old handkerchief from his pocket and tried to wipe the mud off his jacket. He even smiled when he saw an elderly man watching him with concern. "Don't worry, sir," Keanu said, his voice gentle. "It's just mud. It will wash away." The old man nodded, amazed by the humility in his tone. He wanted to say something more, but before he could, Keanu heard his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out carefully, trying not to smear mud on the screen. It was a message from the hospital. His friend's condition had worsened overnight. His heart sank a little, but he pushed the worry aside. Keanu knew he had to get there soon, but he also knew he could not go like this. He needed to clean himself up. He turned around, searching for a cafe or a public restroom nearby. As he walked, people moved out of his way, some snapping photos when they realized who he was. But Keanu kept his head low, not wanting attention. Every step felt heavy with cold water soaking his shoes, but he did not let it shake his calm. He had learned long ago that life threw mud at you when you least expected it. How you wiped it off showed who you really were. Finally, he found a small corner cafe that had just opened for breakfast. The glass door creaked as he pushed it open. The warm scent of fresh bread and hot coffee wrapped around him like a soft blanket. The cashier, a young woman named Lily, looked up and gasped when she saw him. Her eyes widened at the sight of the mud-streaked movie star standing in front of her. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling. Keanu smiled, embarrassed but honest. "I had an accident with a puddle. May I use your restroom?" "Of course," Lily said quickly. "Please, come this way." She guided him to the back, offering him towels and even a spare apron from the kitchen to cover himself while he cleaned up. Keanu thanked her, and for a moment, she could not help but stare. This was Keanu Reeves, a man she'd watched on big screens fighting monsters and villains. now wiping mud off his face like an ordinary man. When he came out, he wore the cafe's apron like a makeshift coat, his wet jacket folded neatly in his arms. Lily giggled softly at how humble he looked. "Coffee's on the house, sir," she said, handing him a steaming cup. "And I hope your day gets better." Keanu's eyes softened. "Thank you, Lily, that's very kind of you." He sat by the window, sipping the hot coffee, trying to warm his bones. He watched the city wake up, cars honking and people rushing to work. But his mind kept drifting back to Marissa, the woman who had splashed him so carelessly. He wondered what pain she carried that made her so rude. Because he believed nobody was born cruel. Something always made them that way. What Keanu did not know was that Marissa's day would soon spiral out of her control. And in an unexpected twist, their paths would cross again. But next time, the mud would splash back at her in a way she could never imagine. Keanu had no idea that by choosing kindness in that moment, he had planted a seed that would change both their lives forever. And so, in that small cafe, with mud still drying on his clothes and coffee warming his hands, Keanu Reeves sat unaware that the world was about to witness a story of humility and redemption that would shock everyone who thought they knew how this tale would end. Keanu Reeves finished his coffee slowly, letting each sip warm him from the inside. The young cashier, Lily, kept sneaking glances at him as she wiped down the counter. She could not believe that the man sitting there was the same Keanu Reeves she'd watched in movies. All her life, she could feel there was something different about him, something genuine. He didn't act like a celebrity. He thanked her twice for the free coffee and even offered to pay for a muffin he hadn't touched yet. Outside the cafe window, the city seemed to grow louder and faster. Cars raced through puddles, horns blared, and people pushed past each other without a word. Keanu stared out at the street, replaying Marissa's cold eyes in his mind. He wondered if she ever thought about the mess she made. He wondered if she had someone waiting for her at home. He wished her well, even though she had left him dripping with mud. Just then, Lily approached with a small paper bag. She placed it gently on his table. "I packed you a fresh muffin," she said shyly. "It's blueberry. I thought maybe you'd get hungry later." Keanu looked up at her with that soft, grateful smile that always made people feel seen. "Thank you, Lily. You didn't have to do that." "It's nothing," she said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I hope whoever did that to you realizes they were wrong." He chuckled lightly. "Life has its way of teaching us, doesn't it?" He slipped the muffin into his bag, carefully took his jacket, still a little damp, and headed for the door. Lily watched him go, feeling as if she'd witnessed something special. She didn't know her small act of kindness would soon become part of a story that would ripple across the city. Meanwhile, not far away, Marissa was having a morning she didn't expect. After speeding off from the street where she splashed Keanu, she drove straight to a luxury spa downtown. She had an appointment for a full-body treatment before an important meeting with a real estate tycoon. To her, her image was everything. The way she dressed, the people she knew, the places she was seen. It was her armor against the truth she kept hidden. A life that felt empty no matter how many diamonds she wore. As she sat in the waiting room, scrolling through her phone, she noticed her reflection in the glass door. For a split second, she thought of the man she had splashed. She could still see the way he stood there, dripping with muddy water, yet saying nothing cruel back to her. She shook her head and laughed bitterly at herself. "It's his fault for standing so close to the road," she muttered under her breath. The spa receptionist, a young man named Brian, came up to her with a polite smile. "Miss Marissa, I'm so sorry, but there's been a mix-up with your booking. The therapist assigned to you had an emergency, and we're short-staffed today. If you can wait an hour, we'll have a room ready." Marissa's eyes narrowed. "Do you have any idea who I am? I don't wait an hour for anything. Get your manager." Brian's cheeks turned red. "Yes, Miss Marissa. I'll check right away." She crossed her legs impatiently. Tapping her heel on the marble floor, she dialed her assistant to complain. "These incompetent people don't know how to run a proper place. I'm going to make sure they regret this." As she snapped at her assistant, a mother and her little daughter sat down across from her. The girl couldn't stop staring at Marissa's diamond bracelet, her eyes wide with innocent wonder. Marissa noticed and smirked. Never seen real jewels before, kid. The mother pulled her daughter closer, whispering apologies. Marissa rolled her eyes. She didn't notice Brian returning with an older woman in a crisp uniform. The manager apologized sincerely and offered Marissa free treatment for next time. But Marissa's voice rose loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. You think I care about a free treatment? Do you know how much I spend here? People like me keep this place alive. Fire that incompetent therapist or I'll take my money elsewhere. Brian's eyes fell to the floor. He didn't dare to speak. The mother with the little girl looked away, uncomfortable with the scene. But in that moment, Marissa felt powerful. She loved knowing people feared her words. But life has its own strange way of balancing things. When she finally stepped out of the spa, still furious and unsatisfied, she found a parking ticket on her windshield. The ink was fresh, the paper fluttering in the breeze. She cursed under her breath and crumpled it up. As she turned to unlock her SUV, her heel slipped on the wet pavement. In the same second she had splashed mud on Keanu. She now fell into a shallow puddle herself. Her designer coat was soaked on one side, and her phone slipped from her hand, splashing down in the dirty water. Passersby stopped and stared, but nobody helped her up. Some even pulled out their phones to record. Marissa sat there, humiliated, covered in cold water that smelled of oil and dirt. For a moment, she remembered Keanu's calm face and how he didn't shout or curse when she splashed him. Something deep inside her chest squeezed, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Are you okay, miss? An old woman passing by asked gently. Marissa snapped her head up, her voice sharp and bitter. Mind your own business. The old woman stepped back, hurt, and hurried away. Marissa scrambled to her feet, her hair dripping, her coat ruined, and her expensive phone flickering as water dripped from it. She climbed into her SUV, slammed the door, and sat there, breathing heavily. For the first time in a long time, her reflection in the rearview mirror didn't look powerful. It looked small, lonely, broken in a way she didn't know how to fix. Meanwhile, Keanu finally reached the hospital. He slipped quietly into the dim room where his old friend, George, lay asleep, hooked up to machines that beeped steadily. George had been like a brother to him when he was a struggling young actor. He had taught him how to fix his motorcycle, how to find the cheapest apartments, how to believe in his own worth. Seeing George so frail now brought a sting to Keanu's eyes. He sat by the bedside, gently holding George's hand. He whispered stories from their past, hoping the memories would reach him through the fog of sleep. He told George about Lily at the cafe, about the rude woman in the SUV, about how sometimes a small splash could become a wave that changed everything. He did not know that somewhere across the city, Marissa was sitting alone in her car, replaying his calm words in her mind. And so, as the day ended, their two stories, one humble and forgiving, the other proud and bitter, moved closer to each other once more. Fate was not done with them yet. And when they met again, the world would see a lesson unfold that nobody expected. Keanu stayed by George's side well into the night. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and blooming lilies someone had left on the windowsill. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors filled the silence. Keanu's mind drifted back to when George was young and strong, always the first to stand up for others. He remembered nights when they shared stale pizza and dreams in a tiny apartment. George had taught him that dignity was not about money or fame. It was about how you treated people when no one was watching. While Keanu kept watch, far across town, Marissa sat in her penthouse apartment. Her wet clothes had been thrown into a heap by the door. Her ruined phone lay in rice on the kitchen counter, its screen cracked and flickering. She had just showered but still felt filthy. The echo of Keanu's calm voice, "I hope your day gets better," would not leave her head. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with no sarcasm, no judgment, just quiet hope. She poured herself a glass of wine, but it tasted sour tonight. Her reflection in the big window showed the same expensive hair, the same jewelry, but none of it made her feel safe. She turned to her big empty living room and saw the silence staring back. Once, this place had felt like success. Now it felt like a cage. She pulled out her laptop and started scrolling through her social media, needing distraction. But the top trending video was one that made her throat go dry. It was her, in the spa lobby, screaming at the staff. Someone had recorded the whole thing and posted it online. Thousands of comments called her a spoiled bully. She read them one by one, her heart sinking lower with each insult. Look at her face, no shame at all. She's probably rude to everyone. Karma will find her. I feel bad for the people who work for her. She slammed the laptop shut, her chest tight. Suddenly, she felt like she couldn't breathe. The walls of her beautiful penthouse pressed closer. She realized, in that bitter moment, that money could buy rooms like this, but not the warmth she saw in Keanu's eyes, not the grace he showed when she splashed him with mud. Her phone buzzed weakly beside her, managing to light up for a second. It was her mother's name on the caller ID. Marissa didn't answer. She couldn't bear another lecture about her attitude or her father's disappointment. She let the phone die again in the silence. Back at the hospital, dawn was breaking. George woke up for a few minutes. His voice was a whisper, but his eyes sparkled when he saw Keanu sitting by his side. You look like you slept on the floor. George croaked. Keanu laughed softly. I've slept in worse places. George's gaze turned serious. You've always been good at letting things go, man. People do awful things, but you just let it wash off you. Keanu squeezed his friend's hand. I don't always succeed, George, but I try. People carry wounds we can't see. Sometimes we add to them without knowing. George nodded, drifting off again. Keanu stayed there until the nurses came in with breakfast trays. He promised to return later that day, but first, he had something to do. A thought had been forming in his mind all night, and now it settled like a steady drumbeat in his chest. He believed people deserved a chance to learn, even the ones who seemed the hardest to reach. So he left the hospital and went back to the small cafe where Lily greeted him with a surprised smile. She handed him another coffee, free again, insisting it was her way of saying thank you for being kind. People came in asking about you. Lily said shyly, someone posted about you online, about how you didn't yell at that woman. Keanu just smiled. That wasn't special. It was just what felt right. But deep inside, he knew it was special, not because of who he was, but because the world was so used to shouting and blaming. Kindness felt like a rebellion sometimes. He asked Lily if she knew a place nearby where he could find dry clothes without causing a scene. She pointed him to a thrift store a few blocks down. He bought a simple clean shirt and an old brown jacket. It cost barely $20, but to him, it felt like a fresh start for the day. Meanwhile, Marissa finally gathered herself enough to leave her penthouse. She decided to go back to the spa to confront the manager for letting that video leak. In her mind, someone there must have been responsible. She stormed inside, sunglasses covering the tired shadows under her eyes. But this time, instead of finding Brian behind the counter, she found him standing to the side, talking to none other than Keanu Reeves. Keanu was there, waiting quietly, holding a small bag. Brian was thanking him for something. She couldn't hear what. Their eyes met across the lobby. For a moment, Marissa froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The spa fell silent. The same people who had witnessed her cruelty now seeing her face off with the man she'd wronged. Keanu walked up to her. He did not look angry or smug. He looked calm. He held out the small bag. Hi, Marissa, he said softly. I think you dropped this yesterday. She blinked in confusion, taking the bag with shaky hands. Inside, she found a tiny golden pin she had lost, a keepsake from her grandmother. She hadn't even noticed it missing. Her eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. Why did you? She stammered. Keanu shrugged gently. You were in a hurry. I thought you might want it back. Her voice cracked. After I did that to you. Why would you help me? Keanu's answer was simple. Because sometimes we don't need more anger. We just need someone to remind us we can be better. Marissa felt her knees weaken. For the first time in years, the icy shell around her heart began to melt. The people around them watched in stunned silence. Brian wiped a tear from his own eye. In that moment, the powerful, rude woman was no longer the villain in the story. She was just a human, flawed, lost, but now given a chance to change. Keanu left the spa quietly, not waiting for thanks. Marissa stood there, clutching the tiny pin to her chest, feeling something inside her shift. She knew it would not be easy. People wouldn't forgive her overnight. But Keanu's choice to show her respect when she least deserved it became the first real seed of hope she had felt in a long time. And so, as he stepped out into the morning sun, Keanu Reeves didn't know that the simple kindness he offered would soon inspire an entire city to believe that even the coldest hearts can find their way back to warmth. Marissa did not leave the spa right away. She stood there by the counter long after Keanu had walked out into the busy street. Brian, the young receptionist, shifted uncomfortably behind her, unsure if he should say anything. Marissa's hands trembled as she held the tiny gold pin Keanu had returned. Her grandmother had given it to her when she was 12, whispering that it would remind her to stay kind no matter how powerful she became. Somewhere along the way, that promise had drowned in her pride. Now it sat in her palm like a question she didn't know how to answer. "Brian," she said quietly, her voice so low he barely heard her. He looked up, surprised. This was not the sharp, demanding voice he knew. This was someone else. "Yes, Miss Marissa," she swallowed, her throat tight. Who recorded that video? The one that made me look like..." Her voice faded. Did she really need to finish the sentence? Brian hesitated. He could have lied. But he chose the truth. Nobody here did it on purpose. A guest saw it happen. People record everything now. It went viral before we knew. Marissa's eyes dropped. The shame burned at her skin. And what are they saying about him? About Keanu? Brian's expression softened. They're saying he's everything people wish they could be. Calm, forgiving, humble. They're calling him a saint. Marissa let out a shaky laugh, but it wasn't mocking. It was hollow. A saint, and I'm the witch who splashed mud on him. Brian didn't deny it. He just nodded, his eyes kind. "Maybe you can change that." Her head snapped up, startled. "How? The internet doesn't forgive. People don't forgive. Some do." Brian said gently, "He did." Those two words echoed through her chest like a heartbeat she had forgotten she had. She turned and walked out, clutching the pin like a lifeline. Outside, the city roared with noise. Taxis honking, people arguing, someone shouting about lost luggage. But in her head, there was only silence, and that one moment replaying again and again. Because sometimes, we don't need more anger. We just need someone to remind us we can be better. Meanwhile, Keanu had made his way back to the hospital. He carried a small bag of pastries for the nurses who cared for George. He knew how hard they worked, how often their kindness went unnoticed. He left the bag at the nurse's station with a simple note that said, "Thank you for caring for my friend like he's your own." The nurses smiled and whispered to each other. When they realized who had written it, in George's room, the morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting stripes on the wall. George was awake, his eyes brighter than the day before. He gave Keanu a weak grin. "You look better, George CROAKED." Keanu laughed softly, pulling up a chair. "Thanks. I bought a shirt for $10 at the thrift shop. You'd be proud." "Always frugal," George teased. Then his eyes turned serious. "You did good, kid. I heard what you did with that woman." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast." "The nurses are talking," George said. "They say she's on the news. People want her canceled. Humiliated. But you gave her her pin back. That's gonna haunt her more than a million angry comments ever could." Keanu sighed, leaning back. "I don't want anyone haunted. I wish she could see there's another way. She didn't splash mud on me because she hated me. She did it because she hates herself." George stared at him for a long time, then nodded. "You're gonna change that woman, aren't you?" Keanu shrugged. "I can't change anyone. I can only remind them they can change themselves." They sat in silence, the bond between them stronger than words. But outside that quiet hospital room, the world was spinning fast. Marissa sat alone in her car, watching the video of herself over and over. Each time she cringed harder at the sound of her own voice. Then she searched for the cafe she'd heard people talking about. The one where Keanu had gone after she splashed him. She found it quickly. It was just a small corner cafe with cracked windows and a faded sign. Nothing fancy, but something told her that if she wanted to understand what made him different, she needed to go there. When Marissa pushed through the cafe door, Lily, the young cashier, recognized her immediately. Her eyes widened, but she didn't look angry. She just looked curious. "Hi," Marissa said, her voice softer than it had been in years. Do you have coffee to go?" "Yes, of course," Lily said. Moving behind the counter, large, Marissa nodded. She hesitated, glancing around the tiny cafe. Did Keanu say anything when he was here?" Lily paused while pouring the coffee. "He said he hoped whoever did that to him would have a better day. He never blamed you." Marissa's eyes stung. "Did he say why?" Lily's smile was gentle, almost motherly despite her young age. "Because he said we all splash mud sometimes, but we can wash it off." Marissa paid for the coffee and stood there, clutching the warm cup like it might steady her shaking hands. She noticed the tip jar, empty except for a few coins. Without thinking, she reached into her bag and dropped a crisp $100 bill inside. Lily's eyes widened. "Miss, that's too much." "No," Marissa said, her voice trembling. "It's not enough." She left the cafe and stood on the sidewalk, staring at the sky that threatened rain again. She had spent her whole life trying to control everything, but she could not control the storm inside her. The only way out, she realized, was through it. That night, Marissa did something she hadn't done in years. She sat at her kitchen table with her phone and drafted an apology, a real one, not written by her publicist or lawyer. She posted it herself, trembling as she hit share. "To everyone who saw the video of me at the spa, I am deeply sorry, but more than that, I am sorry to the man I humiliated with my careless actions. You showed me what real dignity looks like. I don't expect forgiveness. I hope my actions will speak louder than my words from now on." She didn't sleep much after that. The internet was already ablaze with comments. Some believed her, some did not. But for once, she didn't feel like shouting back. For once, she wanted to be silent and listen to what the world had to say. The next morning, Marissa stood outside the hospital. She had found out where Keanu's friend was staying. She didn't know what she would say. She only knew she had to say something. With the tiny gold pin fastened to her coat like a promise, she stepped through the sliding doors, ready to face the man who reminded her who she could be. And so, with the city waking up to the possibility that even the coldest heart can warm again, their story moved forward, proof that sometimes a splash of mud could wash away more than anyone ever imagined. Marissa stood frozen in the hospital lobby, her fingers brushing the tiny gold pin now resting firmly on her coat. Every part of her wanted to run back to her car, to disappear before she embarrassed herself again. But something deeper, something Keanu's calm eyes had awakened, made her feet stay planted on the white tile floor. She told herself, if he can face the world covered in mud without anger, then I can face him covered in shame. The receptionist at the front desk looked up and smiled politely. "Can I help you?" Marissa's voice caught in her throat for a moment. "Yes, I'm looking for Reeves. Keanu Reeves. He's visiting someone here." The receptionist blinked, then checked her list. "He's with Mr. George Martin, second floor, room 108. Marissa nodded, her palms sweating. She thanked the woman and made her way to the elevator, each ding as she rose made her heart pound louder. When the doors opened on the second floor, she stepped into a hallway that smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm soup. Every footstep echoed, as if the walls themselves were listening. Outside room 108, she paused. Through the cracked door, she could hear soft laughter, Keanu's deep, warm chuckle, and an older man's raspy wheeze. She knocked gently, her knuckles trembling. Silence fell inside. A second later, Keanu's head appeared in the doorway. He looked surprised to see her but not angry, not judgmental, just curious. "Marissa," he said softly, What are you doing here?" Her mouth felt dry. She glanced past him and saw George. propped up in bed with a wear-upon blanket over his legs, watching her with mild amusement. She took a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I wanted to see you. To say, the words tangled in her throat. She closed her eyes, forced herself to start again. I wanted to apologize. Properly. Keanu stepped aside, gesturing for her to come in. George, he said, this is Marissa. She and I had a little incident. George raised an eyebrow but nodded politely. Nice to meet you. Marissa. Marissa barely managed a weak smile. Nice to meet you, sir. She turned to Keanu, trying to steady her breathing. I know I posted that statement online, but it didn't feel enough. You didn't deserve what I did to you. You didn't deserve my words, my attitude. You were on your way to do something good and I treated you like dirt under my tire. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like fragile glass. Keanu's face softened and George let out a soft whistle. People rarely come back to say sorry these days, George said. Takes guts. Marissa's eyes glistened. I don't know if it changes anything. I needed you to hear it from me. Keanu's eyes held that same warmth, that same depth that had shaken her to her core. It changes a lot, he said. Thank you, George chuckled. Sit down, Miss Marissa. We were just telling stories about the dumb things we did when we were young. Hesitant but grateful, Marissa sat in the chair by George's bedside. She listened as the two men shared memories of cheap apartments, old motorcycles, and late-night diner meals when they had no money for anything else. She watched how Keanu leaned in when George spoke, never once checking his phone or acting distracted. The kindness was not a performance for the world. It was simply who he was. At one point, George turned to her. What about you, Marissa? You got any stories? She laughed, though it sounded more like a sigh. Nothing worth telling, really. I spent most of my life thinking I was above everyone else. I thought that made me strong. Turns out, it just made me lonely. Keanu's gaze never left hers. Lonely doesn't have to be forever, he said. Something in her chest cracked open. For years, she had buried that fear under diamonds and expensive cars. Now, it felt raw and true. She nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you for not yelling at me, for not shaming me. George grinned. He's been like that since I met him. Once, a guy stole his last $20 at a diner. Keanu chased him, not to get the money back, but to make sure the guy didn't freeze outside. Gave him his coat too. Marissa let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. You're unbelievable. I'm just human, Keanu said, his smile humble. We all are. They sat together for an hour. Marissa learned about George's illness, the surgeries, the endless bills. Her mind spun when she realized that Keanu paid for most of it quietly, never telling anyone, never making it a headline. When she stood to leave, she felt like she was leaving something heavy behind. Outside the hospital, Marissa stopped by the small courtyard where nurses were taking their break. She pulled out her phone and dialed her assistant, the same one she used to bark orders at. Hi, Emily, it's me, she said, her voice clear but gentle. Listen, I want to set up a donation fund for patients who can't afford their care, anonymous, in George's name, and make sure the staff here gets something too. They deserve better. Emily was so stunned she didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Are you serious? Yes, Marissa said, smiling softly at the courtyard flowers. And find that cafe, the one where he went. I want to buy them a new sign. Fix up the roof. No publicity. Just do it. When she hung up, she felt lighter than she had in years. A light rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, almost like forgiveness. Meanwhile, Keanu watched her through the hospital window. He knew she had a long road ahead. People would still mock her, doubt her change, but he believed in the small seeds that kindness could plant. Sometimes, the people who splashed mud were the ones most desperate to wash their own hands clean. As Marissa walked away, the tiny gold pin glinted on her coat, not as a badge of wealth, but as a promise to herself, the splash that had humiliated. Keanu had washed something dark off her soul instead, and somewhere deep inside, she hoped that when people spoke of her again, they'd remember not the mud she threw, but how she learned to wipe it away. Days turned into weeks, and the story of Marissa splashing mud on Keanu Reeves and what he did next spread like wildfire. The video of Marissa yelling at the spa staff was overshadowed by a new story that took over the news and social media. People now shared photos of her standing outside the hospital, hugging the nurses, handing out coffee, and quietly thanking them for their work. Someone caught a photo of her slipping an envelope into the donation box at the cafe where Lily worked, the same cafe where Keanu had dried his clothes that muddy morning. Lily, the young cashier, became a local hero in her own small way too. When people found out how she had offered Keanu a warm cup and a safe place to clean up, they came to the cafe in droves. Her tip jar, once nearly empty every day, overflowed. She used the extra money to fix the cracked windows and get a brighter sign out front, a gift quietly funded by Marissa, who asked for no credit. Keanu kept visiting George in the hospital. Each visit was filled with laughter, old stories, and quiet moments when the two friends simply sat together in silence. George's health stabilized enough for him to move to a small rehab center. On the day he left the hospital, the nurses lined up in the hallway, clapping softly. Keanu wheeled him out, his hand resting on George's shoulder. Outside, a small crowd of local journalists waited. They wanted a comment from Keanu about the mud splash story. They wanted him to tear Marissa down or give them a dramatic quote about forgiveness. But Keanu just smiled, that soft, humble smile. Sometimes, he said simply, life splashes mud on you. You can stand there angry, or you can wipe it off and keep walking. Kindness doesn't make you weak, it makes you free. They asked him if he forgave Marissa. There was nothing to forgive, he said. We've all splashed mud at someone when we're hurting inside. It's what we do next that counts. Meanwhile, Marissa kept showing up, not just for the cameras, but for people who needed help the most. She visited the cafe often, dropping off boxes of pastries for customers who couldn't afford breakfast. She volunteered at the hospital, using her connections to fund new beds and better equipment. Some people rolled their eyes, saying she was just fixing her image. Others whispered that people like her never really change. But Marissa didn't care about the whispers anymore. For the first time in her life, she cared more about the quiet moments than the headlines. Each time she clipped that tiny gold pin to her coat, she remembered the grandmother who told her it was a reminder to stay kind. She'd forgotten that lesson once. Now she was learning it again, not because she wanted to look good, but because kindness finally felt good. One rainy afternoon, Keanu stepped into the cafe again. Lily greeted him with the same warm smile as before. She poured him his favorite coffee and handed him a blueberry muffin, fresh, warm, just like that first morning. Someone left this for you, Lily said, sliding an envelope across the counter. She didn't want to disturb you. Inside the envelope was a simple card. No fancy logo, no rich signature, just a handwritten note that said, "Thank you for showing me how to wash off the mud, Marissa." Tucked inside was a check, made out to George's rehab center, enough to cover all of his bills for the next year. Keanu's eyes glistened as he tucked the note into his jacket pocket. He looked at Lily, who watched him with quiet wonder. "Do you think people really change?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu took a sip of his coffee, feeling the warmth spread through him. "I think," he said, choosing each word carefully, "we all get muddy sometimes. But there's always water. There's always soap. There's always a chance to come clean." Lily nodded, smiling. "I'm glad you came in that day." Keanu smiled back. "So am I." Outside the cafe window, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean. Marissa, standing on the corner with an umbrella, caught his eye through the glass. She didn't wave. She didn't make a scene. She just smiled, a real, honest smile that said thank you without a single word. As Keanu stepped out into the drizzle, he tipped his head to the sky, feeling the droplets slide down his face. The same rain that once splashed mud on him now felt like a blessing. He walked down the street, a simple man in a simple jacket, carrying a lesson the world would remember long after the headlines faded. Because sometimes the smallest act of grace, a calm voice, a kind word, can wash away years of dirt, leaving Something brighter underneath. And sometimes, the mud isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning.